Hey everyone, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
But I just felt like the opening song Rangeela, it's just you've got the bang for your buck already. And the movie hasn't even begun. So this time when I was watching it, I was really reminded of La La Land because you have this huge song dance sequence and you already are like, bas ho gaya paisa vasool.
Ram Gopal Varma's Rangeela is an immensely popular and lovely 90s movie for good reason. It's a film where Aamir Khan, my generation's greatest method actor, got a chance to out-Bidu the Bidu. A film where the Bidu, Jackie Shroff of course, gave one of his most fabulously understated performances. A film that proved to be the breakout vehicle for one of the most underrated actors and stunning dancers, Urmila Matondkar. And of course, there was that generational soundtrack by A.R. Rahman. This is Himanshu, and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. But before moving on, an important friendly reminder. If you enjoy organic conversations centered on Indian cinema, Love of Cinema podcast was created for people just like you. So if you find value in the podcast, if it helps you in discovering new films or new facets about familiar films, do consider supporting the show. Love of Cinema podcast is my passion project, and with every episode, I've attempted to create something that cinephiles will continue to find value, not just today, but over time as well. To create something that goes beyond banter, beyond trending films. So if you find value in the conversations on the pod, please do consider supporting the show. Your support will help me continue creating content with shelf life for fans of Indian cinema everywhere. You'll find the link to support the show in the show notes. You can also support the show directly from the podcast website. It's fast, it's easy, and your support is greatly appreciated. Independent pods like this one don't have a platform for amplification and distribution. Independent pods rely on amplification through its listeners. So if you like the episode, please share the episode on social media, as that will help other people discover the pod. Back to today's episode. Delighted to have Mrunmayee Lagoo Waikul, co-creator of Netflix popular crime drama Scoop and writer of Taapsee Pannu's Thappad, on the podcast today. When I asked Mrunmayee to pick a favorite film of hers to talk about on the podcast, she picked Rangeela. I was thrilled to hear her choice, because Rangeela is a great film for so many reasons. And also, since it would give me a chance to pick a writer's brain, a writer who also happens to be a woman, on one of the more stronger female characters written in the 90s. Mrunmayee and I chatted about Rangeela's Millie, how Rangeela's writing is quite special because it's gloriously and charmingly old school, the three lead performances, Ahmed Khan's fresh choreography, and Rahman's soundtrack for the ages. Mrunmayee also pointed out how RGV's films always provided agency to their women. She also unpacked some of the film's writing. All things Rangeela with Mrunmayee Lagoo Waikul. Here goes. Hey Mrunmayee, how are you doing?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for coming on the podcast to chat about Rangeela. And we're definitely going to, talk more about that film since that's what the podcast is on. But I know that
Right.
you have a show coming up soon on Netflix. It's called The Scoop.
Yes,
And
that's right.
if you want to tell us in a nutshell what the show is about, that would be nice too.
Okay, first of all, it's lovely being here. It's always a pleasure talking about movies, especially movies one has loved. So thank you, Himanshu, for this lovely opportunity. With regards to Scoop, it's based in the world of crime reporting, and it's based on a book written by a crime reporter called Jigna Vora. The book's name is Behind Bars in Baikala. So it's her experience. She was implicated falsely in a murder conspiracy a few years back in 2011. So the series charts her journey as to how she got herself in this mess, and then what happened to her life, and how, as in how everything changed for her after that. So that's what the series is about.
Great, great. Looking forward to it. So, Mrunmayee, let's start talking about Rangeela now. Now, Rangeela is
Great.
such a landmark, 90s film that I don't know where to start. But, I will just say that, that movie is unique for so many reasons. I mean, right
Hmm.
from the outset, from its opening credits, with the black and white
Right.
stills of yesteryear actors displayed alongside the
Right.
credits, set to the sounds of traffic, it sets a very different tone. And there are so
Right.
many other things that are unique about the film. Like, there isn't a single negative character in the film. In a
Hmm.
sense, it's a bit like some of Rishida's movies, of 70s and
Right.
80s.
Right.
And
Right.
I remember like RGV mentioning somewhere in an interview that, Sound of Music was one of his favorite films. And, that
Acha.
doesn't have any negative characters. And he wanted to do something like that in Rangila.
Oh,
So that's the
okay.
reason behind that. But, there are
Huh.
just so many things that are unique about the film. And my first question to you is, why did you choose
Right.
Rangila to talk about on the podcast today?
So it's a fairly simple answer, but I arrived at it with a lot of thinking. I was trying to figure out, it's very difficult to pick one's favorite movies, right? Because there are so many. So I went through a whole thing, and then it was a very basic question. I was like, which is a movie that I would love to see over and over again? Which is a movie that you could start watching from any point and be engaged and end up watching completely all over again? And there were a few answers, and Ragnida really struck out. I was like, that's one movie which has immense entertainment value, right from the story to the characters to the songs to the visuals, everything. It's immensely watchable. It's got this lovely quality where each and every scene is entertaining. Whether whatever emotion it is servicing, whether it's a happy emotion, whether it's sad, whether it's romantic, each and every scene just has that quality which you're hooked, and then you go on, and then you go on. So that's why it just struck me that it's a film that I've always loved watching whenever it comes.
And your mom was part of it too, right? So,
Yeah, that is, yes, that is coincidentally
yes.
how it is.
Do you remember any anecdotes or anything that she shared from those days of while she was shooting for Rangila?
No. So Rangeela, I think, came out in 95, right? So I was like
Yes.
really young. So, but I do
Yes.
remember going for the premiere of it.
Oh, okay,
And
nice.
yeah, so that was a nice affair. And I mean, it didn't register to me that it's like a premiere. For me, it was just watching a movie. And that was in itself used to be a very, very special occasion because we all loved movies in our family. So I remember that. And then, of course, after the movie, there was this whole, meeting people and all. But then I was just so happy with the movie that none of the rest really, I didn't retain much of the rest.
Understandably. Yes, yes, yes. So, Mrunmayee, I was thinking, perhaps, we should start. I really wanted to talk about the character of Millie, played by
Right.
Urmila, because I think, again, that, stands out, especially in the cinema of the time, especially popular in the
Mm.
cinema of the time. The way
Mm.
I look at Millie's character is essentially it's representative of the aspirational middle class of 90s.
Right.
She's strong, she's progressive. She's also non-elitist. Someone who
Mm.
calls out the men in her life. She's also an outsider who makes it. There's a nice scene, where we find out that she has failed class 10 3 times, but the
Yeah.
family still, has got her back. They support her acting ambitions.
Right.
So it's a very different. It's a very middle class family that you can relate to. But I love the
Yeah.
character of Millie. And I thought that Urmila brought such a certain innocence and vitality to that character. And it's one of her
Right,
early performances, that provided a glimpse of her wide range that would be, that would come to the fore with her later performances in Pinzer or in Ek Hasina Thi, Bhoot, Kaun, even Tehzeeb. So
right.
it's a very special character, and I also think that it's a very special performance. What did you make of that character? Could you speak about the characterization
See,
and your first
so
impression?
I mean, she is basically, there are these two men around her, and there is her dream. I always felt that, Ram Gopal Verma has this really amazing quality to get the word so correct that when you say middle class, he really does portray it in such a relatable and yet so authentically, but at the same time retains that magic, even if it's really realistic and authentic and all, there's a little magic to it. And I feel that, when he creates this world, it really, really helps actors to really embody it and give a very, very authentic performance. Now, with regards to just her character, it's really beautiful how they have played it on the borderline with both the other men. She never, there's this innocence when she is with Jackie Shroff's character, where with Kamalji. You can completely see that she's this young girl with a big dream and she's in awe of him and she respects him. And she's always played it with like a great innocence that you were talking about earlier. And you can see it from her eyes that, that's the relationship it is. With regards to Munna's character, you can see that it's a very close friend that she depends on, and even she herself doesn't know until that point that she doesn't even like, I mean, she just says it that, even I love him. So I felt like that graph was so beautifully handled that till the end we didn't know what her reaction was going to be, even though we were sure that, with Kamal it's more like a respect or that sort of a thing. But how is she going to react to Munna? And then when she says it, you just believe it. So I felt like that graph was maintained so lovelily by the actor and the director. So that was one thing. Also, I felt like, the whole ambition was treated in a very human way, because there's this whole
Great
debate
point.
always where, women are ambitious and then, it becomes a very negative connotation for women, never so for the men. But, I felt like the conversation began much ahead of this whole dynamic anyway. So there was nothing like that. I felt like her ambition was treated in a very human, a very like everyone has a basic right to dream, no matter if their dream is just too big. Or for a middle class family, it's far fetched because very rarely does a background dancer become a heroine. It is far fetched. I mean, you feel you have a foot in the door, but the door is just really, really, you have to break it down with everything you've got. And even then, it sometimes just does not. So I felt like her ambition, her drive, like you said, the family supporting her despite the failing in 10th standard. I felt all these little qualities added to her character a lot, and it's very real. People don't really give education that much importance when they can see that their child is of a certain capacity or of a certain kind. And at that time it wasn't like how it is today, where it's like the end of the world. It's like, acha, theek hai, she does this really well, and the family is supportive. She goes, works as a dancer, she's passionate, and they're also not overtly engaged in all of it. They're like there and they love her, they support her, but that's about it. They let her be. Just like Munna and just like Kamal, I just felt like all the characters are in support of her and all of them are letting her be herself, which is like such a big thing for a woman in any field. People just allowing her to be and allowing her to flourish. And I felt like with the kind of men he created, it really helps Millie's character really shine. So yeah, all these myriad things about Millie.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And we'll talk about the writing a little bit more later on. But I just wanted to mention that it's written essentially by Ram Gopal Verma, Sanjay Chhel, and
Right.
Neeraj Vora, all three men. And I think they
Yeah.
did a good job of actually writing a woman character for that time, because if you look at
Yeah.
most of the main lead actress characters of 90s, even have problems with like Simran of DDLJ. I know that's a much
Right.
loved movie, but it's in sharp
Yeah.
contrast to that. The Millie of Rangila
Right.
is in such sharp contrast to all of those characters. And to think that that was written back in the 90s, by three
Right.
men, always like kind of blows my
Men.
mind, because,
But
that was so different from the other.
so if you were to actually look at all the women in Ramu's movies, they're always very strong, you
Absolutely.
know,
Great
and
point.
they all have agency, they all have a say, they all matter, they all make a difference in the narrative, even if it is Urmila and Satya, which is like this really soft girl, who you see any day, every day, who may or may not register on you. But the kind of impact she has on the man, or Tabu in D Company, oh, sorry, Manisha Koirala in,
Right.
it's such a small character, but you can see her power. I think he gives them a lot of, he empowers his female characters a lot. Even if it is Antara Mari in Must, who's playing the friend's character, you remember them after the film. You don't just remember the hero or the heroine, you remember the other people. Like even not because my mother was in Rangeela, but even a mother's character, you know, he creates memorable scenes around them, where, yeah, she is hassled and she has her agency, and it's not just about making favorite food and, saying that, okay, go study, or like, I'm going to complain and stuff. But there's a lot of, I think he sees women as they are, or a little bit better actually, So I think that must have reflected in the writing team, where he must have seen what Millie is, and because the entire film hinges on whether we like Millie or not, So his vision of Millie must have led that writing team, I feel, you know. So it is pretty phenomenal now that you talk about it, because it is a pretty big step ahead in that time, you know.
And especially, with Ramu, because there is this whole connotation about his male gaze, that gets talked
Mm.
about so much. But he also happens to be a filmmaker, who wrote very strong women, right from like
Yeah,
Raat. So it's interesting,
absolutely,
the many
absolutely.
dichotomies of Ramu.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I
And
thought that one more movie came to my mind with a female character, not Raat or Bhoot or something. Sorry, if it comes back to me during the
sure,
conversation,
sure.
I'll bring it up.
Even Cohn, I mean, it could be argued that
Yeah,
Urmila's character in
yeah.
Cohn, I mean, that's totally it's essentially a murderer. But even there, I mean, she the power stays with her. The power lies with
Hmm.
her.
Yeah, I was thinking about Pyar Tune Kya Kiya, where it's like
Right, right.
a Fatal Attraction remake, and what powerful character in Fatal Attraction. You've seen Glenn Close, and you can't forget her. And I felt like he interpreted her fairly decently in the adaptation. I mean, you have to justify a few things for our audience here, and you feel the need to. Now, thankfully, we don't. We the people are not really trapped into those things. But at that time, you had to give a justification for your leads if they want to behave in any other way than normal, but even so, he just takes leaps with female characters all the time. So yeah.
Right, right. And it can be argued that the title of the film itself, Rangila, I mean, is more of a
Hmm.
statement about Millie, who's not only
Yeah.
a dream chaser, but also aspires to a full life, a life full
Yeah.
of all the colors of life, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so it's more about that. I remember, I think, my if my memory serves me right, I think there was some review back then where they called the movie Rangili, because
Acha.
they were trying to make an argument that Urmila's performance was much more kind of dominant. So that was an interesting take for that time, I guess.
Hmm.
But of course, we got to talk about Amir and his performance. And Amir is
Yeah.
Amir. His Probably, Mrunmayee, I'm thinking that this is probably one of his early experiments with method, because I don't think before that we could have really called Amir Khan a method actor with the kind of movies he did. That doesn't mean that he was a bad actor or anything
Absolutely.
like that.
Absolutely. But I think so. I have had the chance of working with Ahmed, AK as we call him,
Right.
as an assistant director over many films, and I believe that he's always been method. Right from his first film, even before he got into movies when he was doing theater and just getting the hang of it, I think he's always been method. It's just that it became a thing because he started playing characters which are so unlike him, you know. So for the way he looked and for the connotations his kind of a personality had at the time, he is here playing a tapori, a really cute looking, fair skinned, almost elite looking tapori, So I felt like the method then became a thing because he was pulling it off. He was adopting that body language, he was adopting those mannerisms, and he was very skillfully weaving it into a fairly natural performance. So I felt like before that, even in Kayamat Se Kayamat Tak, I felt like he did have a method. It's just that he was far closer to that character for us to be able to actually, point it out. And then even during Rangeela, so Rangeela is before he became like Aamir Khan, right? Like this amazing, versatile, methodist, perfectionist, all of that. All of those labels became big. At that time, I felt it was like pretty amazing for this man to have taken on a role which actually Jackie Shroff would have nailed, because Jackie Shroff has played Taporis so well, to be there in that film where there is also a Jackie playing an incredibly elegant, suave, debonair kind of a character, and to actually pull off a Tapori who's doing black. I felt it was like amazing, and it was a great casting choice. I feel it just made things really interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that Amir kind of out bidooed the bidu.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's amazing to think that, but that's to Ramu's
it's
credit,
really well
like
put.
you said, with casting and all that. But staying on Amir's performance for a minute, I love how he plays Munna. I mean, there is his signature like charming performance, the charming aspect to it. But he plays Munna like one giant tribute to Hindi cinema's collective idea of Tapori or a vagabond, whatever you want to call it. Because there's a bit of Devanand to it, there's a bit of Bachchan. And 3 years later, he would do the Tapori act again in Gulam. But those two
Right,
performances are fairly distinct. There isn't much
right.
sameness to it, and that speaks to his craft and his ability. Yeah, he was just great. I mean, we know, that Amir is a great actor and all that. But boy, I mean, during those emotional scenes, I mean, he's gonna
Yeah.
make you cry. He's gonna get you teary eyed.
True. What I love about him is that he is just so true to the character that, he doesn't have all these. So, like, for instance, when Millie shares her happy news with him, as a character who's in love with her and who can see that she's going further away, he should be feeling terrible, right? But as an actor, one would suggest that, I should be happy for her. Otherwise, I don't look good, you know but as a character, you're going to be it's damn difficult for you to feel happy about something which is actually going to create distance between you and the girl you love. So I felt like those very genuine reactions of like, yes, I'm happy for you, but this is translating to very shit news for me. You getting a movie and becoming a heroine. I mean, dude, how am I ever going to get you after this? So I felt like those reactions are possible because he's always so committed to playing the character. He's never really thinking about whether I'm going to be likable or not likable. Oh, but then I should be happy. I should at least show happiness, and then maybe later I can sell. So all these things he never does. He's just very, very true to the moment, and how it should be and how it should look. Also, what I loved about him in the film is the kind of chemistry he had with all the other actors also. They really made the family scenes come alive, and that kind of creates this lovely feeling about Munna, where he's not just invested in her. He's such a sweet, great guy that you kind of forgive him all that other behavior where he's acting like an arrogant person, putting his feet up or taking a banana without paying. You kind of let that go because you can see that he's such a great guy. So I felt like he did even those scenes with as much investment, and I think we must credit the director for it, because I don't think he treated the family scenes as कि हाँ ये scenes रखने पड़ते हैं तो रखे हैं. He was actually moving the story, the characters ahead with those scenes, and immensely contributing to the actors' performances by doing that.
Yes, the unfolding of the story is very organic. It never feels like the comedy tracks have been inserted or anything like that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
was the case was quite common back in 90s. And
Oh, there used to be a whole different movie going on in the comedy.
right, right. And before we move on, while we're talking about the performances and the characters, we got to talk about Jackie's performance too, which is pretty solid.
Absolutely.
And I think he's the person that doesn't get he actually received the Best Supporting Actor Filmfare. But when we
Very
talk
well
about
deserved.
Rangeela, absolutely. But when we talk about Rangeela, it's usually that Aamir and Urmila who take the spotlight. But
Right.
I mean, Jackie did so many things, pitch perfect in this movie. For starters, he definitely captures the loneliness of the star and all that.
Yes.
He has a backstory. But I think what RGB really tried to do with Jackie and Rangeela is he sort of doubled down on Jackie's image as a style icon, projecting him
Hmm.
as a movie star with godly looks, someone who can match Urmila's, scorching sex appeal. So,
Right.
it's like they
Right.
both, I mean, Jackie is the star and, Urmila is like the upstart. But,
Yeah.
there's that factor too that, they kind of match each other in terms of the, their projected images. And I thought like
Right.
Ramu nailed that as well.
I think I agree. I absolutely agree. I don't think I have seen this shade of performance from Jackie before, even though he may have played someone who's stylish or someone who's rich or someone who's a star or, someone who's very decent. But this shade, which is so complicated because every time you went to him, he had really nailed that, the thing that you said, loneliness. But beyond that, you could feel that there is something, some big tragedy, at the bottom of this loneliness. This loneliness is something that he has kind of taken on to be able to deal with that tragedy. He doesn't want to engage much because his heart is not in it. And I felt like for once, a star was portrayed without a very stereotypical, trappings of what a movie star behaves like. It was very, like, for instance, when they have to pack up early because the other heroine is acting a bit unprofessional. At that point he is just calmly sitting and taking off his makeup and asking, okay, what are the next dates? And that's literally what happens. If it's an unscheduled pack up, your main star is not going to like throw a tantrum or walk off or like call 50 people and say, oh, what is the next thing we can do and stuff like. They just go sit, remove makeup and say, अच्छा ठीक है, अब next का थोड़ा बात कर लेते हैं. So I felt it was a very realistic portrayal of what that life is. And it's kudos to the writing team and the director that they gave him a solid backstory. Your heart really goes out for him. And you feel his generosity, the nobleness of his character in the end, when he is kind of like, just takes the back seat and allows this young love story to play out in front of him. You can feel for him, you somewhere feel like, I mean, your heart breaks a little bit, and that's all thanks to that tragedy, which I felt was amazing the way Ramu did it
Oh,
via just
yes.
sound.
Oh, yes.
I thought that was I mean, he was always experimenting, right? And he was literally at the top of his game. He was like beginning to get to the top of his game with every film. And these little experiments that he was doing, they would just land with that scene. You just know what happened and it hits you. And then to have Urmila's close up in that way at that point, and her just being shaken up that I mean, I didn't expect such a hard hitting story to suddenly unfold right now. It was just so perfectly done that I felt like that character really, really takes the cake actually. Very few times the third person, hero takes the cake. I felt like Ramu really gave him very solid stuff to work with. And I also felt like where his performance is concerned, he did a little different stuff with his dialogue delivery. He changed up the punctuations, he changed up, the rhythm. He pulled off that been there, done that star versus Urmila's just beginning to kind of get into the field. So his whole attitude, the way he would talk, things were casual for him, while they were very intense for her. For him, he so ये सब देखा हुआ है. I'm not really interested in this. I felt like he pulled off that attitude really well with the way he was delivering lines. There was a thought behind the way he would randomly break up a sentence at very odd punctuations. I felt that was when tells her to call him just Kamal. I felt like he did that really well. So all these bits kind of come together to create this really great character who's unforgettable. Despite the movie being Urmila and Amir.
Yes, yes, that's an interesting point that you brought up. I never thought about it like that. And now that I think about it, Jackie Shroff is someone who kind of oscillates as far as his language is concerned. He oscillates between Bidu speak and the typical kind of Southern California accent
Yeah,
by way of Bandra. So it's between those two that he's always oscillating.
that's
But
true.
it's interesting point that you make about his punctuation. And going back to that scene where he's talking about his wife, yeah, that was brilliantly done. I think that's one of my favorite scenes from the film
Yeah,
because it's great storytelling. It's fast, it's quick, it's effective. And
yeah.
the way the sound editing has been done and the expression on Urmila's face and everything, I think it just lands. Like you said, I think that's very nicely done. And of course, the ensemble cast, like we will talk about all the cameos and everything. But let's
Oh
start
man, yes.
with, Rima Lagu, your mom, and Achut Pottar. I mean, I love that. And along with like Motilal and Millie, they really make
Oh God,
like
yes.
a real middle class Mumbai family. And
Absolutely.
both of them are, I mean, Rima Lagoo was just a legendary actor. And Achut Poddar too. I mean, he comes from theater and everything. So, he's
Yes.
also a great actor. And, he has played this so many legendary, like, they're not really cameos, more than I would say character actor, acts like, where he has played this father. I mean, I remember he one of his most memorable acts as a father is in Angar, where he plays
Yeah.
Jackie Shroff's father. He
Yeah,
keeps
yeah, yeah.
calling
Yeah.
Jackie Shroff from the loo. That was
True,
one of
true.
my favorite performances of Achyut Poddar. But then Rajesh Joshi, the late Rajesh
Hmm.
Joshi, who plays
Yes.
Pakya. But great
Fuck
scene
yeah.
with him as well, and the camaraderie between Aamir and him. It's all the supporting cast too was great. I mean, right from Avtar Gill, Gulshan Grover, and then all the cameos. W.V. Rao is there, the
Yeah.
cinematographer. There's
Yeah.
Saroj Khan. So all those cameos and all those small parts, they were great too.
So, I actually, when I was re-watching the film for this conversation, I realized that that actress, the one who's a bit hoity-toity and kind of throws a tantrum, she's actually Shefali Shah. And
Yes, yes.
I was like, wow, that's amazing because Ramu really had an eye for talent. He's really brought so many people and it was just booming. I mean, he was spotting them, he was using them well. And I noticed Shefali Shah because I felt like the attitude was so bang on of this girl who's, there were these heroines who used to be called baby, and their mothers would be on set and they would need juices and they would need all these things. And I felt like her body language was so spot on. So I was kind of watching her very intently while the rest of the scene was happening. And then it dawned on me that I know this. I think it is Shefali Shah. So I went to the credit and it really is.
Right.
And there are so many of these, like Neeraj Vora comes for this really short scene in the party and he really steals the cake because these are characters that you will see in these filmy parties where everything begins and ends with them, you know. So clearly, Ramu had inside knowledge of these things, and then he also knew how to milk it for its humor while still being in context of the film and not making some tangent, in the middle.
Right, right.
I felt like Motilal was like a inspired name, naming choice of the character and casting. He was just so perfect. This really disinterested young kid, who still loves his sister, who still roots for her, but in his very nonchalant kind of like, I don't really care, but you should do really well because you're my sister. I felt like that whole thing was so cool. His and Munna's rapport. He wasn't treating Munna like the hero. For him, Munna was this Kapori who just keeps hanging around, who at best sometimes helps him out, but at worst puts him in trouble. So I felt like those equations and those dynamics were really solid in the scenes. I also feel like, at that time, I feel like, I mean, this might be a bit, this could be argued other way, but I felt like uh, an ensemble thing would work a lot at that time because one could focus on making a scene work. One wasn't very focused on, is this scene doing something to the story or not. Where are we going with this? All these things that today's writers are like really trapped with, that the craft of it. I felt like there was so much commitment ki, okay, this is the scene, we're going to attack it and make it the best possible, most entertaining scene, period. We're going to feel good about having shot this scene today and go home. And everyone would pour their heart out in that commitment. So even when my mother would shoot for these movies, despite getting a mother role only. There was nothing like something very drastically different or anything. But some movies you would really enjoy because there would be a lot of give and take. The director would be very invested. He would give them a real chance at making something authentic happen on screen. The actors like Urmila, for that matter, also came from theater, began with theater. So there was a great chemistry between those actors. They knew what it meant to rehearse and give and take and play off of each other. Amir is a very, very collaborative actor. Jackie is a very collaborative actor. So when the right bunch of people come, they make even the simplest moment really shine. And I felt like that happened, and that happens a lot with Ramu's films because he really casts such brilliant, versatile actors, who just take that moment and just go full on inside. Even I felt like there were like, for instance, there are, I was just seeing because, your writing brain kicks in after a point, and I noticed that there were three scenes where Amir is drunk and wondering how to tell her. Now, in today's world, we would be like, it's a repeat beat, three times it's the same beat. Once he is drunk with Pakya, once he is drunk with her father, once he is drunk and it converts into a song. And come on, we get it, move on. All these things are coming into play today. But at that time, it was like, it's an interesting scene. We're getting to see more of him. We're getting to see more of his character. All this is going to cumulatively come together in the end to just show how much he loves her and what a big deal it was for him to be able to say it to her. So I felt like these choices at that time were very organic. Today we somewhere get caught up in the maths of it and the craft of it and, overthinking these things. But tab I felt like instinct would, I think, be far more at play than, very logical craft, if one can say that. And I feel like even though Rangila has its moments, ke chale ja raha hai, but you never feel that anywhere, because it's all just working, in some way or the other.
It never feels like a drag,
Yeah.
not a single scene. That's a great point again, Mrunmayee. I mean, now there's so much technicality to it, to the craft and the writing, and in those days, probably they were just blitzing out the scenes without really
Yeah.
thinking about
I mean,
anything.
so many times my mother would say that, they would just be writing it and improvising it right there.
On the
Like
set,
the
right?
director would know ki, these few points need to come out. You say this and you say this. Acha, you can say this. And then the actor's like, hey, aisa joke karu kya? And they would be like, yeah, it's funny. Go for it. It used to be literally improv. Like some of the best scenes we've seen have just come out of amazing improv and the director be open-minded and allowing that to happen over there.
And solid actors can pull that off. So it's
Yeah,
like they
yeah.
you won't even realize that. and a lot of
Absolutely.
solid acting in Rangeela. You know, Rangeela is also stacked with all these tongue-in-cheek, meta references to the film world of the time. You know, one of
Yeah.
that you just brought up with the tantrums of the heroine and her mother, which are again
Yeah.
supposedly a parody of an 80s star actress and her
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
Baby ke liye, Sitafal milkshake lao and all
Correct.
that.
Correct.
And there is Stephen Kapoor character, that is parodying
Oh, I thought that was
certain
fabulous.
director with Hollywood aspirations.
Right.
Um, and there's so much meta stuff going on in the film too. I mean, the film Mr. Bond, the fake film in the film in the film rather, the film that is playing and Munna is selling the tickets in black for, is
Right.
supposedly produced by Jhamu Patel and directed by Harish Shah. Now, if you remember, that's a
Acha.
reference to the Sugand brothers, Jhamu
Correct.
and
Correct.
Harish.
Jamu Sugan.
Yeah,
Correct.
and his brother Harish, who produced some of the
Right.
biggest
Right.
films
Right.
back then. So, Ramu did
Right.
all these interesting things as well. So that's
Yeah, I
done
think they were
in
having a lot of fun while writing and making it.
definitely they were having a ball. I mean, you can just tell that they were having a ball. There are no doubts about it. And then, how can we talk about Rangila without talking about the generational soundtrack, by Rahman?
Oh man, yes,
It's
absolutely.
it's
It's
just a
stunning.
knockout. It's knockout, and
Absolutely. I mean, even now I listen to those songs while driving. I mean, I'll just go listen to the entire album. And that's the thing with Rahman, it's just, you can just keep listening to so many of his songs. And Rangila had the quality where, you could sing along. Some of Rahman's songs are very difficult to kind of sing along while they're happening. But Rangila had a little commercialness where you could sing along that song. And I have to mention, songs is the one part of it, but I felt like the choreography and the visualization of those sequences were fabulous. I mean,
excellent
the things
stuff.
that excellent. I mean, the things that come to your mind, like kya kahe, kya na kahe, the concept of it, where he's drunk and he's imagining, and this whole world comes down and dances with him to try and figure out whether this boy is even going to say it or not. Then yeah, I might be sounding like I'm going ahead of myself, but I just felt like the opening song Rangila. It's just you've got the bang for your buck already, and the movie hasn't even begun. So this time when I was watching it, I was really reminded of La La Land because you have this huge song dance sequence and you already are like, bas ho gaya paisa vasool. Iske
You
baad
said it.
whatever is there is
You
going to
said
be
it.
fabulous. So at that time to have this great thumping opening with this fabulous number choreographed so well for that time, we weren't seeing these kind of dances and this kind of a choreography which was more polished, which was more rhythm, but at the same time there was attention to the lyrics. So I felt like it just began with a bang, and that song just was magic. I mean, after that, very difficult for the film to go wrong. So, like from the audience's perspective, you're already sold, And then there was this song, "Mangta Hai Kya" in the studio, which had this Broadway kind of a feel. Hi Rama, which again was a very sensual song, but it is Sarojji's miracle. She always makes her actresses so powerful that they never only remain like the object of desire, they actually look like they have desire themselves. And she actually made Jackie also look like the object of desire through Urmila's eyes, where he is the one running towards her. It's usually the heroine who's doing all the running, right? Here it was the hero who was kind of running towards her, chasing her, pursuing her, while the heroine is this really strong woman who is, kind of in this cat and mouse thing with him. So I felt like each song had a concept, each song had these stunning visuals, each song had a story about the characters, about their worldview, about their situation, taking it ahead. So I felt like ideally I would like say Rangila is a musical for me. It's got these great big songs, very paced out in a way that you can almost say कि अभी गाना आएगा अभी in that way. So it's almost a musical film.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Rangila's soundtrack is one of my favorites. And like I said, it's generational stuff. It's taste shaping stuff for an entire generation. The soundscapes, the experimentation. It seeks inspiration from diverse artists, such as Bade Ghulam Ali Khan and Australian
Right.
rock band In Excess. But it blends genres like house, dance pop, classical
Yeah,
fusion, synth pop. There's an eclectic assortment of voices that Rahman brought. The soundtrack is
yeah,
nothing short of epic. And the variety, Mrunmayee, the variety. I mean, the
variety.
sparkle
Yeah,
and the
absolutely.
splash of Rangeela Re, the moody
Yeah,
musings of
absolutely.
Kya Kare, Kya Na Kare, the sexual tension
Yeah.
of Hai Rama, the
Even
frenzied.
I felt like the costumes contributed immensely to that, the choreography, and taking it to that level, because I mean, at that time it was a huge controversy, Urmila's clothes, and like everyone was appalled that Ekta, she is this Maharashtrian middle class girl who's become an actress in real life. So this whole Maharashtrian community was like, how is our girl doing all this exposure and all of that? And it was a bit too sexy for that time. And there was this big thing that, kya hai ye, and where are we going and where are we heading? By today's comparison, it feels like chaste almost right now. But I felt like they presented her in such a fresh, youthful, modern, aspirational kind of stuff. And nowhere did she look vulgar at all. And I felt like the styling of everybody was authentic. Munna was had his own style, but still sticking to the character. Jackie had his own style, sticking to the character. She was presented just beautifully. I mean, I think it's a dream for any actress to be presented with such thought in every single frame of the film, especially in the songs where movement, a costume can make or break a movement sometimes, the way it flows and the way it looks in, and then Ramu's use of silhouettes, his use, of course, it must. I don't think they had like a huge or great many resources, because things were done in a much smaller scale. So the director had to be super creative in how he's going to bring scale and grandeur and all. And I think Ramu was using everything he's got, to make each song look different and big. So I felt like his creativity was at like the peak during all of those. And then, of course, the choreographers, them making it all happen and taking it to that level, where Rahman is, because he gives you a song and it just has to be big, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's the coming together of a great soundtrack, great lyrics too. I think, Mehboob's
Yeah,
lyrics deserve a mention too. They often get overshadowed
absolutely.
by the music, but all the songs are written in true spirit of the characters. If you look at Kya
Yes.
Kare, Kya Na Kare, he nails that Tapori lingo and even the rhythm
Yeah,
of it and the beats
yeah,
of it, which perfectly vibes with Munna's character. The playfulness of Tanha Tanha, that's totally in sync
yeah,
with Millie and her vibe. So definitely Mehboob's lyrics, deserve a mention. And of course, yeah, Manish Malhotra's costumes and Ahmed Khan's, excellent choreography. I mean, it's just
yeah,
that was his
yeah,
first film apparently. So
yeah.
it's absolutely. And again, somewhere I read that Ramu had given Ahmed Khan the reference of singing in the rain for the choreography. And apparently, he first Saroj Khan was supposed to do all the songs, but
Hmm.
he was not. I guess they were on different pages to the ideas that they had. So he had to work with Ahmed Khan afterwards, but he really loved,
Acha.
what he came up with.
Right.
So
I felt
definitely,
like Ahmed Khan was a fabulous dancer himself. He was an assistant of Sarojji's before
right.
he broke out. So, he, I think, combined the art of dance with the craft really well. So you
Yes.
have your expressions and you have your abhinay, but then you also have a physicality, which this music required, which this generation required in the film. So I felt like he combined that really well, and I think because of his own youth, he was pretty young at that time. He brought that little freshness to the whole thing, you know. So yeah, I think it all just came together really well in this film.
Yes, yes. And we got to talk about the writing, by Sanjay Chhela and Neeraj Vora, which is, if you think about it, the very soul of the film, in my opinion. And
Yes,
I think both of those writers are very underrated, especially Neeraj Vora. He's no
I
more,
agree.
unfortunately. But, I wanted to ask you this, Mrunmayee, this is something that people rarely touch on when talking about Rangeela. But since you're a fellow Maharashtrian, I think you will maybe also pick up on this. But for me, I always found large portions of the writing of Rangila, especially the brand of comedy and dialogue,
Yeah.
influenced a lot by the Marathi comedies of the late 80s and early 90s. I'll give
Mm-hmm.
you an example of what I mean by that. That scene where Millie comes knocking on Munna's door because she wants to practice
Right,
her lines, and Munna
right,
responds from inside, "Arey apun ghar pe nahi hai."
right.
Bits like those seem straight out of one of those Marathi comedies. Like something that
Mm-hmm.
Lakshmikant Berde or Ashok Saraf would have said in those lovely,
Mm-hmm.
slapstick comedies of the 80s and the 90s. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, yeah, I do, I do. But I just feel like, I think Rangila, no, first of all, in terms of the screenplay structure, I thought it was fairly bang on because, you are making a triangle. See, there are so many themes involved, right? There is a theme of her dream, and we are following the girl achieve her dream. There is a theme of this innocent love between someone who is an orphan, who is brought up on the streets, versus a fairly well-to-do middle-class girl. And then there's another layer of this really this big person who's made it, who's up there in the bungalows and in that kind of a world. So there is that. There is a triangle going on. There is the social and the economical play a big part in the narrative, you know. So there are so many themes going on, but nowhere does it get heavy handed. There is this, I think there's a conscious effort to keep it light, to keep it humorous, and to see the humor in things. More than to keep it light or humorous, I think the attempt was to see the humor in these things, and I thought they did a really good job of it. And keeping with that, I felt like the climax was really handled well. Nowhere did it become dense and heavy just because it is climax. Because there is a tendency to then make things a little complicated or make things heavier or more emotional. But I felt like the way they treated the entire film, they reached the climax also in that same flourish. Like when Munna and Millie meet, uh, they just know they're meant for each other and they get into their fight, plain and simple. And the audience is left with this lovely feeling that, chalo, these two are together, ab milke jhagde karenge. That's what they do. That's how their love is, so you leave it. So I just felt like the lightness remained throughout, and I think that's the credit of the writers who never took things too seriously. They were very aware that they're making a young film about people who are in their early 20s, people who don't know much about life, people who are going with their instincts. They are not that bogged down with society yet because they're young. They've not become cynical, or they've not become bogged down. They were not writing about that kind of a world. They were writing about a world which has hope, which believes in miracles, which believes in dreaming big. And I felt that flair just was there throughout. And another thing that really stood out for me was the amount of world building that they did, in the film, in different ways. And that comedy thing that you were talking about, actually, I felt that they were very true to Bombaya,
Yes.
more than the Marathi thing. So I felt like that whole Tapori lingo or even the conversation at home, it was very, very Bombay of that time. Nobody had any one kind of way of speaking in Bombay. Even now, people in the same family also speak different Hindis, and that was very honest. Even Jackie, for that matter, had a certain kind of Hindi. PC, the producer, had a certain kind of Hindi, but it was all very true to Bombay. You would find all of them in Bombay. So I felt like they kept the character of the city alive through the language, through the humor. Because if you remember Chachi 420, it had that same flavor. It had that flavor of the city. They had similar jokes. Like, for instance, Kamal Hassan was in the bathroom and a big thud sound comes. And Paresh Rawal is like, what happened? And Kamal Hassan in panic says, Mera blouse gir gaya. And Paresh Rawal is like, but itna awaaz? And Kamal Hassan is like, but I was inside it, no? So these kind of humor, it's very true to the Bombay side of things, I feel. So I felt like that was authentic, and I think the writers were very well versed with the Bombaya. At that point, actually, most movies were set in Bombay. It's only
Right,
now that we are moving to the hinterlands, where most of them are set in the north.
right, right.
Till Rangeela and all, almost pretty much everything was set in Bombay only. Be it
Yes,
Gulam, be it anything, of that type.
right, right. And Neeraj Vora would obviously, very famously take that brand of Mumbai,
Absolutely.
dialogue
And
in
you're
the
true
Hera
in, I
Fairy
mean, you're
movies
right
later on.
in, yeah, you're right in citing Lakshmikant Bedi and Ashok Saraf, because they were very much there, no, at that time, and their movies were pretty big. So, and all of these writers would watch other stuff. They were aware of what's happening in regional, they were aware of what's happening in the world, and they used to, at that time, really happily take what they liked, get influenced, use it, adapted to what they were doing. There was all this sort of going on. It wasn't, you know, I feel like films and writing for films is a very borrowed thing. You know, yes, your philosophy comes from within, and your, the pulse of the character and all those big things, they may come from within. But it's a very borrowed craft. You've seen things, you've looked around, whether it's from life, whether it's from other movies, other sources, but it's all very borrowed and applied. That's how it is. And at that time, they were acing that, borrowing and applying it and making it work. I felt like it was very jugadu in nature, even writing, in a way, and not to take away anything from their craft and, their effort and all that.
And it worked. I mean, that's what counts.
Yeah,
And the film is shot by W.B. Rao, as we said. Who also shot Hum, which is another favorite film of mine. But
yeah,
and he also does a cameo in the movie as the DOP of the movie
yeah,
Rangeela. But Mumbai is as much a character in the film as the three leads. It's pretty much
right,
shot in and around Juhu, Bandra, and Warsaw. There's
yeah,
some parts in Navi Mumbai as well. But some of the shots are just ace. I mean, I love that shot of Millie running down that Warsaw lane towards the ocean, and then
yes,
Pakya and
yes,
Munna, chilling on the boulders of Warsaw Beach. The film's
yes,
got a terrific Mumbai feel to it, and the
yes.
ocean, plays a big part throughout the film. Whether it's the scenes between Pakya and Munna, or even the songs and Jackie Shroff and the Urmila scenes.
Right, right. Yeah, I think they've used Bombay to the fullest, and at the same time, it's a very the Bombay we seeing is very unique to their film. It doesn't feel like we've seen this part before anywhere else. And I feel that kind of happens because, the genre is very clear to them. You know, what is the mood that they're going for? They're not going for a dark underworld. They're not going for a scamming or a banking, because all of that is also Bombay, right? You have those parts also. They're going for a very hopeful, light world, and the beaches and the sea, these are places of respite for people in Bombay. One wouldn't go so much to parks as much as just take a walk on the beach, or go there after. And especially during the 80s, 90s, people would go to the beach. It was a much cleaner affair than, and it was a legit place to kind of hang out or find solace or all of these other emotions. Plus, I felt like the house that they chose for Millie and Munna. I mean, one would be hard pressed to find a house like that. It has such charm, but I felt like I liked that little leap. Where they've kind of created this own little cozy world of theirs, where everything is just so nice that you don't want to disturb that. So every time Jackie kind of comes closer to that world, I, as an audience, I'm like, he looks different here. He stands out a bit differently here. This world is of Millie and her family and her brother and this Munna and Pakya, and there was a great coziness to that. And then you would go into Jackie's world, which is more lavish, opens up wider. If you were to notice Munna and Millie's world, you would feel like there were not very many wide shots. Things were happening more intimately inside, lack of space, those kind of things. When you would go to Jackie's bungalow, you would go to Goa for the shoot that they go to, things open up in a big way. So I felt like that grammar, and I'm fairly certain, I don't think they may have discussed it at such great length that we're dissecting it right now. But I think instinct,
Right.
knowing the material well, all of this must have just made these little differences happen and made that Bombay feel very much Rangila Bombay, as opposed to a Vastav or any other Satya or whatever.
Right, right. I always wondered if that house is. Do you know if that house is in Bandra? I know there is a house like that right across from where Candies is.
I
Uh,
mean, that could be, or it could also be
but
Warsaw village
it could
because
be,
there
yeah,
was
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of
It's
these
difficult to tell, I
smaller
guess.
looking, yeah, yeah.
Mrunmayee, we got to talk about that one scene that is hilarious. The scene at the old Juhu Centaur coffee house, with Raju Mehta's cameo as the waiter and
Yeah,
Munna Millie show up for their date and AC
right.
चालू है sir तो
Oh,
इधर
it's an
घुमाना he
iconic
says.
scene, isn't it? Absolutely. I think
Those
it's gone down in history as one of the lines, and people just keep citing that, and people just keep cracking that joke even now. I mean, there is that one guy in your group in college who will say these lines. So I think it
absolutely.
just speaks to the iconic nature of what they came up with over there. And then Amir delivering it in his really typical flat but yet cheeky manner.
That's a great scene. And when I recently asked on Twitter, for this podcast, hey, what's your favorite bit from Rangeela? And almost 100 responses, and probably 65 to 70 out of those were essentially lines
Wow.
from this particular scene.
Right, right.
That it's either the तो ऐसे इधर घुमाना and वो सब अंग्रेजी
Yeah,
आइटम नहीं चाहिए ऐसा कुछ
yeah,
लाजो आंख
yeah,
को
yeah,
लगे and all that.
yeah. And the great part of that scene is that because of this, which they have done in the beginning, his cheekiness, his bravado, this false bravado that he is, adopting because he is literally shitting bricks, right? Because he needs to tell her and stuff like that. It's because of that the further part of the scene hits you so much when she gets up and leaves, and then he's just sitting there, and all the food has come. I felt like, they did that with a lot of scenes where a scene would begin on a note and would end up in a completely different note. And that's, I feel like, the classic handling of films of this kind. Even if you were to reference something like a Friends or something, you would have this really happy moment, and and suddenly it would become emotional, and then somebody would suddenly create a joke and break the tension. So they kept doing that in even in this film, which it just makes it so delightful. Which is what I was saying, that every scene has an entertainment value you know.
And one more scene I wanted to talk about, Murmi, and I would love to hear your favorite moments from the film as well. But that the one scene that has always stayed with me, that I really love, and it's a fairly emotional scene, is a scene where Munna goes to gift Millie the ring that he has bought for her, and he finds
Hmm.
Millie, holding the much fancier necklace
Yeah,
gifted by Kamal. Rahman's fantastic background music and the heartbreak on
right.
Amir's face. And I think that's a great scene because, it's to some degree, it's there's realization on the part of all three characters because,
Hmm.
Amir definitely, gets the hint, so to speak,
Right.
and I think somewhere, Jackie's character also realizes that, hey, this guy has a thing for her. So,
Correct.
which until now, probably, he was just, too busy to kind of ignore or to sense that.
Right.
And,
Right.
even for Millie, she can sense that there he's off, because when they start moving out of the room, he's like just lingering around and she says, Munna chalna or something
Yeah.
like that.
Chalo, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love that scene. What did you think about that scene?
I felt it was lovely. I felt it was handled. Again, Ramu's extremely, almost resisting being heavy handed really works wonders because this is such a heavy moment, right, for Amir. But he walks in with an intent, which is quickly communicated. She's back to him. She turns around and immediately goes for the necklace. You know, immediately Jackie Shroff, and so everything happens very quickly, organically, simply, and then you're left with such a huge impact. You know, so there is no track in to amplify a moment or there is no extra close up to underline a particular emotion, or there is no extra, I don't think he does any of that. I just feel like he handles the scene with such a light touch that after it's over, it just hits you what just happened. It allows you to feel after the scene is over also, instead of just forcing you to feel it while it's happening. I feel like that touch that he had, and I guess that's why he could make a film like Rangeela on one hand, Satya on the other hand, and like just has such a variety of genres, con and all these things. I felt like he just understood the pulse of what that film needs. You know, for me particularly, I wouldn't say I have like a favorite scene or anything, but I really do love the transitions of Millie and Munna's friendship, in each scene, where they begin, where they end, when she goes for the rehearsal, he starts off irritated and she's trying to tell him, and then he's like, no, I don't want to do this. And then she starts crying, and then he just feels terrible about it. That scene was very, very sweet. Then at when he doesn't come to eat the rasgulla, she goes to get him home and manages to bring him up. And then kuch hota hai, and then she doesn't want to eat, and he turns it around. I felt like that friendship was handled really sweetly. You really, really loved them as friends, and you hope that they become something more. I felt like those transitions were very, very nice. I mean, I would keep watching it over and over just for that very natural way where he would pull a prank, or she would do that. So those were I loved, and I absolutely love the use of the song Rangila to punctuate stuff every time. Like for instance, later when she reads the letter at the premiere and instantly makes up her mind and gets up, and that track just kicks in, and you can feel the urgency, you can feel that heightened emotion with just the placing of that track when it kicks in the end, when she finally meets him and Jackie is watching them and they're arguing like little children, and she just hugs him again. That track kicks in exactly at that moment and just heightens that emotion to another level. So these choices I felt really were magical for me.
Yeah, it's all nicely done. The use of the tracks in the background. And the Rangila is also momentous for one another reason. Because I think Rangila's box office success is also a key moment in Hindi cinema and the RGV era. Because of the film's success, RGV found backers, and he was able to
Acha.
experiment and hop around genres, producing and directing
Right,
some of the best films of last 30 years.
right,
And
absolutely.
more importantly, along the way, he shaped and mentored a group of writers and storytellers who would
Hmm.
truly push the boundaries with their films in the years to come. People like Kashyap,
True,
Atul Sabharwal, Jaideep Sahni,
true,
Shimit Amin. So it's also a film that's a milestone for other reasons, that Rangila has its
absolutely.
place in the history books.
Absolutely. I mean, Ramu's crew is like a treasure trove of talent. Each one of them has started from where and gone up to where, and there are so many still coming out of it. you know he's I mean, I wouldn't like to define the man by his movies alone, but there's such an immense contribution of his. Like generations of people have wanted to become directors and writers watching his films, across gender, across age, across everything, languages. Like for me, I mean, Rangila stands out for me where Ramu is concerned, purely because that's the kind of person I am. That's the kind of movie I like. But he has something for everybody. There is Everyone has a favorite Ramu film. Nobody can say that in their top 10 or 20 films there is not a Ram Gopal Verma film somewhere in there. Horror, he just redefined horror. Until then, what were we seeing as horror? What was there? With just that one shot in Raat, you're just like pulled in that theater. I mean, people being left alone in a movie theater must be horrifying, since that one shot in Raat. Even when he did the horror one with Urmila, which is kind of
Booth,
similar to
yeah.
Raat, Booth. But even that Vastu Shastra, all of these movies, he just kept pushing even himself through different genres, and what he contributed via that way, I think is it's stuff of legends, literally.
Right, right. And finally, I wanted to ask you this, Mrunmayee. What did you think about Must, which came out, a few years later, which is essentially kind of a
I really
reworking
loved
of
it.
Rangeela.
Yeah,
And but he subverts it by, the casting, because here Urmila is the star. And,
yeah,
Aftab is the starstruck, young kid.
yeah. I mean, actually, very recently, I just wanted to see that song where Aftab is saying, I mean, this must, the title track, picturized on Aftab. I felt like we were just talking about portrayal of a young adult, and what it is to be in love, what it is to be infatuated by something. And we all just zeroed in on that song, and we just watched it again because he's just gotten the boy bang on, that age, the hormones, the infatuation, the exposure, at the same time, that flight which youth has, where nothing seems impossible, all of that has come across in just that one song. And what a score! I mean, I think Sandeep Chauta's, I think, best work ever until date.
Terrific soundtrack.
So beautifully done. And such a kooky idea also, in a way, later on the film, you know. So I really enjoyed Must.
Yes, yes. Same here, same here. That film didn't work, but, it's still a good film.
Yeah.
Talked about its legacy, I guess, but how do you think
I
the
think
film
it
holds
holds
up?
up. It is so, I mean, watchable even now. Because, I mean, I wasn't watching it purely from some nostalgic standpoint. There was so much I was learning while just looking at it, like the ease of it, like the richness of characters, the richness of being just in the moment, using a soundtrack so beautifully to take a story forward, not shying away. Like today, we are shying away from lip sync songs, we are shying away from big dance numbers and all those things, unless it's like a typically manufactured item song, so to speak. One can't really call Rangila songs item songs, although each one of them has that amazing quality of hooking you. So there's so much to gain from that film. Even now, it doesn't sound cheesy yet. It doesn't sound like a younger generation who watch it and say like, what, like, what is this? It doesn't feel like that yet. They all feel like today's people who could still be around you. And I always felt like, that's a movie like, I don't know why they didn't do that, but it was a movie like dying to be made a sequel of. You're just leaving it at this really ripe place where these two really volatile but in love people are together. So I, for one, would have loved to see what happened to Millie and Munna later in life, because it would have been a very, very conflicting life for them, because Munna is a headstrong guy and Millie is an ambitious girl. So that thought
There
always
would be
keeps me very
friction, yes,
occupied.
to say the
There would
least.
be so much friction. But then
Right.
there is a great love also over there. So it would have made another fantastic watch. But I feel like it's fully timeless. Maybe the art will evolve, the craft will evolve, all of that. But the heart of it, it's very, very timeless.
Great. On that note, that the film being timeless, I think that's a good note to end our discussion on Rangila here. Thank you so much, Mrunmayee. Really appreciate this. I think you
It was
brought
a
so
joy.
much
It was
insight. This is
entirely
why I
otherwise.
like to talk with writers, because they are definitely looking at a film from a very different prism, and I get to learn a lot, about my favorite films. But I always get to learn a lot, new things and new aspects. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure chatting away.
Thank you, Mrunmayee. If you liked the episode, do consider supporting the show. Your support will help me continue creating content like this. You can find the link for supporting the show in the show notes and on the pod website. Also, do share this episode on Twitter, Insta, or Facebook. And do subscribe, rate, and review the pod wherever you listen to your pods. You can follow me on Twitter and Insta at loveofcinemasf8. Feel free to reach out there or by email with your comments, feedback, and suggestions. You can find my email in the show notes. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off. And as always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.